Hello and welcome to At the 55, your home for U Sports football. Me and Tom are back on the mics to give you an update on our last 10 days or so because we have been in the Waterloo region covering some outstanding football. Tom more so than myself. We're talking the Red Black weekend, Team Ontario, all the way through to the East West Bowl. We have everything involved with that and much, much more. But first, Tom, how the heck you doing, my friend?
Oh, I cannot tell you how good I am doing, especially with that shot in the arm of just football that we got a chance to be around. You always go through this sense of withdrawal from U Sports football in particular here. It's a long off season, and to have East West to really just dive back in and remind you why you love this damn sport so much, it's just been so fantastic. So I'm feeling great.
And you also capped off your Saturday, having spent the whole day in Waterloo in the sun covering East West, then to go and pick up a win, mind you, with your Oakville Titans over the Oshawa Hawkeyes. So a big football weekend for you. And yeah, this pod again is to kind of recap our experiences. And for our folks out there who are podcast only and not social media centric, Dad, I'm talking to you, just to let you know what the heck we've been doing. So we're starting all the way back on May 2nd, where Tom, you were privy to a really cool new and the kind of very, very new event that Team Ontario put together, the Senior Bowl, highlighting the grade 12 level players across OSFL who, if you're unfamiliar with the nature of how Team Ontario works, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the mechanics of it, because Red Black is sort of the pinnacle of Team Ontario tryouts to be able to figure out who will represent Ontario in the Canada Cup this summer. And if you're unfamiliar, if you think OSFL, usually we think U18, U16. Those usually track with U16 is essentially junior football. Grade 9s and 10s. U18 is grade 11s and 12s. It's a cutoff based on the season starting, not specifically just the year itself. For the Canada Cup, though, and I don't know what drives the difference, but for the U18 squad, there's no room for grade 12 athletes. It's based on the year, and they would be turning grade 12 students in 2025 at some point are turning 18, barring, jumping ahead or whatever. So the Senior Bowl, and I'll let you take it away here, set up to kind of fill that void of how do we get some representation or an opportunity for our grade 12 athletes, some of whom were probably in that Canada Cup last year, picking up a gold for Ontario, with possibly their last year of high school football. So Tom, anything I was missing there and everything else and just your experience of not just being there, but helping coach, take it away.
No, I think you did describe that beautifully, my friend, as you always do. This showcase here was really meant for all of the other folks who are all these kids who were not able to even try out for Red Black weekend or were not eligible to play in that Canada Cup. And obviously that's a massive opportunity to get recruited from that standpoint throughout that entire process. You have coaches all across Ontario for Team Ontario. And then the moment you get out to Canada Cup, you've got coaches literally from across Canada who are in for that. So for people who miss out on that, don't quite have, scholarship opportunities as of yet, that's kind of where this Senior Bowl came into play here. And we saw a number of really great athletes and really talented people who, for whatever reason, maybe just didn't get a proper showcase or, maybe they're somewhat new to football, whatever the case may be, but had this opportunity here. And the concept of it was great. What I will say is that this did seem rushed when it was put together, and also having it on the Saturday and then having the Red Black on the Sunday meant that we had to get pretty creative with the fields that we were going to. We practiced at one at a park in Waterloo, and then there was another one at Jacob Hespler, and then we actually played the game at Waterloo at Warrior Field here. So lots of stuff here. It's the inaugural year, obviously, so there's going to be some bugs and some things to work out. But it did seem from that side of things, if I'm being honest, a little rushed from that standpoint. But the ultimate, at the end of the day, the game itself was great. I was really honestly shocked with how exciting the game was. Really big hits, big plays. Nobody wanted to go for just a field goal or a kick. So everybody scored touchdowns, went for 2 points. I mean, getting a chance to work with head coach Jason Laskis. He is the head coach for the North Halton Tide and the head coach for Georgetown, who it seems like everybody in the region knows where was the team that upset the Nelson Lords in the city championship this past year. So getting a chance to see him, see and work with a legendary McMaster alumni and quarterback, former quarterback and head Crichton winner, Phil Scarfone as our offensive coordinator, getting a chance to reconnect with an old teammate of mine and Dylan Guy. It was just an awesome experience to be a part of from that standpoint, to really just be around people who care about football, who care about these kids. So that part was great, and the game itself was great, but certainly some things to work out there. And once again, in the inaugural year, that's always going to be something that happens. But the thought of this and why they brought everybody together, it's a great thing.
I agree. And it was news to me when I showed up in Waterloo 2 days later on May the 4th. And obviously, for those who, listened in enough, you probably heard me talk about this. I'm not all that much online. I am just not online really at all. But I think it's a terrific event. And I think all those bugs that you mentioned are testimony to the fact that, yeah, it's the inaugural event. Maybe it was rushed. Tom, do you feel like, because I feel like this has the legs to become something that could be one of the crown jewel events in Ontario, from the standpoint of some of the best players across the province. From your understanding, were a lot of those players, because in theory, the age gap they're at, you'd expect a lot of those players are already committed. What did it seem to be the case that all these players, or that some or however many of these players had a commitment lined up? Was there a lot of recruiting going on there? Maybe guys that were still going to go back for an extra year of high school. How did you gauge that dynamic at the event?
So I specifically, obviously, was coaching the offensive line with Dylan Guy, but when we spoke to all the kids that were there, I believe, if I remember correctly, we had 8 or 9 offensive linemen. Only one had a scholarship already. So for the most part, these were all kids who still, like, it wasn't as if we got sent, kids that weren't good at all. Like, these were really good offensive linemen that, for whatever reason, like I said, maybe they don't necessarily have the grades at certain spots, or maybe or whatever. I'm just purely speculating as to why they didn't have these, but they had an opportunity to really showcase themselves and why they should. And for the most part, they did. There was a number of coaches who were there already for Red Black, and then just stayed that Saturday. I saw Queens, Laurier, Windsor, Mac, Guelph, all of the teams in the area here, and they were out talking with a lot of their guys. And there were a number of kids who were already committed, and they had nice pictures and whatever else. So it was a bit of a mix, but I would say mainly from my experience, the vast majority of the kids that I was working with did not have scholarships and were trying to get them.
Well, then, no doubt, an incredible platform for them to be on. It'll be so fascinating to see how this grows in the years to come. Again, credit to, I guess, Football Ontario. It's a Football Ontario event, correct? That, whether hastily put together or whatever the case may have been, I think that's an awesome step forward for football in our province. And I look forward to seeing how that can grow and how we can continue to promote that event. As you said, though, the following day, we were right back in the mix in Waterloo for Red Black. And Tom, we were talking about on a few pods ago our experience at a Team Ontario ID camp at York University. Gosh, I guess was that in February? It was in this calendar
February,
year.
Yeah.
Who knows? We're midway through May almost at this point. It's redonkulous. And this is the continuing process of Team Ontario getting to condense I don't even remember, like, talking with JT Suey, the number of guys that he had mentioned came out in the hundreds in these initial ID camps, hosting them in key locations, places like Toronto, up at York, Waterloo. Even, I think you had reminded me, one up in Sudbury. So trying to leave no stone unturned. Let's talk about that process a little bit as far as how we got to that date on May the 4th, and then let's dive into the game itself.
Yeah, so like you mentioned, there's ID camps where anybody is allowed to come out and try out for this team here. And like you mentioned, there was 3 major ones across the province of Ontario here. And then from that, I believe the final number was like 350, 360 kids or something like that, which just purely from a football standpoint is fantastic, because that means that kids are out. They want to be a part of football. They want to be a part of sports just in general. So I think that number is awesome. So from that, they whittle that then down to, I think, the next 250. And then from there, they do 2 days. One day has 125, the next day has another 125. And those were both done as the prospect camps at the University of Guelph, where they held those. And then from there, they take that 250 and they whittle that down to the top 90. And in that top 90, that's where you get the Red Black Bowl, where it's 45 on one side, 45 on the other. Both sides, and this happens for all of the age groups, U14, U16, U18. The nice part about this is that on both sides, whether you're on team red or team black, it's the same defense and it's the same offense, because obviously that's the defense and the offense that they're going to be using at the Canada Cup. So this is a great opportunity to see the kids in your system. How well do they play? How well do they understand the playbook? Because that's a direct, feeder into, will they be able to make the team? Because if they don't understand the playbook by now, they're probably not the right kind of person mentally, at least.
And in that process, another huge shout out to Football Ontario. And I don't know if this was new this year, but perhaps it was, where in the selection of each of those teams of 45, they did a live draft to be able to figure out who is going to be on which team, which is a piece of advice I'm going to throw out to you sports when we get into the East West Bowl of things, to maybe spice that event up. But terrific event, to jump ahead to that a little bit prematurely. Now, Tom, the game itself, we were doing a pregame, a game day live from Waterloo, and let this be the first of many shout outs to Coach Bertoya and his staff and everyone at the University of Waterloo, and of course Marianne Vaughn for keeping that thing held together. I'm sitting here in a nice piece of East West swag, thanks to the legendary Madam Vaughn. We were doing a pregame game day live on May 4th, on a cold, wet, and rainy May 4th, setting up that game. Big shout out to our guy and Coach Tommy Kanichis, who was one of the coaches participating in that and giving us a bit of insight into some of the key players to look out for. From my own standpoint, it was a real pleasure, in that there were a lot of kids who I coached when they were grade 9 students on a U16 team, my last summer being in London, Ontario, with the Junior Mustangs, who are now grade 11s, vying to make Team Ontario for this summer's Canada Cup. That was a really special moment for myself, but there were a number of players who were highlighted, and though there doesn't seem to be a box score we have access to, a lot of exciting football. And as you mentioned, they've been working with this playbook for quite a while, and you actually had the pleasure of getting to interview one of the star players after the event as well.
Yeah, the offensive player of the game, Isaiah Petricor. He is a running back out of the Burlington area. Actually plays for the Burlington Stampeders, my own alma mater, which is a fantastic thing to see. I think actually he's from the Hamilton region, because he does go to Cathedral, but travels down to Burlington to play there. From a lot of the people that I've spoken with, he was a guy that a lot of people seem to overlook, because maybe he didn't have the size or the strength. He's listed at 5'10", 180. And let me tell you, that kid played fantastic. He seemed to have a whole bunch of versatility, whether that's catching the balls out of the backfield. His speed and agility were outstanding as well. He had a great offensive line that was blocking for him as well. But I believe he finished with 2 or 3 touchdowns on the day, and just really impressed a lot of people with how well he played.
And it being a wet and rainy day makes for a good day for a running back to get a lot of shine. And obviously that's not going to happen without the blocking up front. And as we were going through this roster prior to the game and reading through the news and notes, I mean, brother, they make them differently than they used to, because some of these guys on the O-line are I don't know what caves they're finding these big bears from, but my goodness, I don't know if you have the roster or any of those notes in front of you to go through. It's staggering. And if there's one thing that we know that's reflected in the CFL draft, it's reflected in East West, it's that as far as the Canadian athlete wanting to make it to the CFL, the big guys are the prized possession, if you will. And these, it's a cool experience for us being a U Sport focused entity here, getting to look at the future of our game at the U Sport level, who are then going to be the future of the CFL game. But some of those linemen were just staggering.
Yeah, I mean, 3 guys from Team Red that Tommy Kanichis highlighted to us as well. Oren Nadine, 6'7", 315 pounds, plays for Corpus Christi in Burlington and
Of
the
course.
Stampeders. Offensive lineman Carson Metcalf, listed at 6'5", 300, plays for St. Andrews College. And then lastly, Owen Prack, 6'3", 300 pounds, plays for the Junior Ticats and for Cardinal Newman out in Hamilton as well. I mean, those are monster kids for the folks who are listening to here. Like I myself, I'm about 6'4", but I didn't hit 300 pounds until I was in university. Like this is this is some big bodies here.
And these again are at the oldest grade 11 students who could
Yes.
theoretically spend 2 more years honing their craft, eating, training at the high school level before even setting foot at the university level. So, what a great testament to the state of our game, the state of football across Ontario. And Tom, before we move on to the rest of your week in Waterloo, because it literally didn't stop the you got a 12-hour break until you were right back at the university. As far as I know, as the non-online person, just from what I hear, the final team has not been listed yet, though, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. We will keep you updated with that. We'll probably do our best to get JT on or maybe Aaron Giesler as well to talk about that when we get ready for Canada Cup this summer. Because as we talked about on the pregame show and as we talked about with JT Suey, Director of Culture and Sport, who's a friend of the show and friend of ours that we've had on a few times now, it's a different mentality prepping for this event, knowing that the target is on your back. That, and as you know, spoiler alert again for the experience that we got at East West, you getting to interview, if not the GOAT, one of a short list of potential GOATs in head coach Glenn Constantine from the Laval Rouge et Or. He spoke to, and I'm sure that interview will make its way online shortly, on just how impactful that grassroots level football system in Quebec is, and Team Quebec is always a strong program. But it shouldn't surprise anyone that to be able to have strong U Sport teams, you need those strong OSFL teams, those strong high school teams. And the thing that unites it all is Football Ontario with their mottos of football for all. So again, hats off to the coordinators, huge undertaking. And again, the women's team as well getting ready. I believe they had their team formed. They weren't in a tryout process. They were honing their craft, getting ready for their summer as well. And as you mentioned, all the various age levels there, and just a bureaucratic organizational nightmare to state the least. But by all accounts, maybe just because those people running it are cool, calm, and collected, so you don't feel like it's a big deal. It was handled seemingly with such tact and with such apparent ease, though I'm certain there were a lot of late nights and stressful moments for that crew. Tom, I'll leave it to you for any final thoughts. Otherwise, let's jump into your week with East West.
Yeah, I just before we hop into East West, I just want to give people an understanding of how much football was happening at Waterloo, just purely on that. I believe it was the Saturday or the Sunday. I can't remember. The days are now getting muddled up, but on those days that you were talking about here, where it was the day before when they were practicing and everything else, you and I are walking in, and in the field house, they've got it sectioned off. Maybe like 75% of it is for the women's practice that's going on inside. The last 25% are for the current team that's on there for U14, U16, or U18, depending on the time slot. And even from then, they're doing half the team in there, or at least a chunk of the team in there. And then the other half, mainly specials or whatever else, are out on the field house. So literally every single piece of field that they have is just dedicated towards football. And at any given point, there's 2 or 3 teams that are on these fields practicing or doing whatever they have to. So I'm sure, took a ton of coordination and just communication, scheduling, and everything along those lines from that side of things. So from the outside looking in, it seemed like it ran very fantastic. So well done, Aaron Giesler. Well done, JT Suey, and the entire Team Ontario team, including the coaching staffs for U14, U16, and U18.
Amen to that, brother. Let's fast forward like I said, maybe less than 12 hours. You were back at the University of Waterloo for the kickoff of the East West week. You're now second year covering it. Tom, in any order you want, take us through the week leading up to that game on Saturday that I was there in attendance with you, with our friends at Royal Media, who also, of course, helped us do the pregame, the game day live for the Red Black. Just take us through the week, reflect on the ways it was similar and different from the year prior, and just what it was like being there with a new crop of athletes in Waterloo.
Yeah, so on the Tuesday morning, so everybody flies in on the Monday. On the Tuesday morning, that's when the actual combine starts. And there's a lot of guys who are there who are, anxious about something or whatever else. But the big thing that I try to tell everybody is that East-West combine is essentially your starting point. Because for the folks who are not aware of this, at the CFL combines that you and I have both had a chance to go to, you get these handouts for all of the athletes who are in attendance. And in that athlete form, it says East West previous numbers. And directly next to that, they'll have the updated combine numbers. And the real big thing that I've talked to a number of scouts about is just purely, did you get better? Where can we see improvement? If especially, I think the biggest one to really tell on is the bench press. And you and I have gone back and forth on the actual validity of the bench press in terms of, what we think it really tells about strength and whatever else. But it is a great barometer for the biggest showcase to how much have you been training. If you go from 15 to 20, that's a great showcase of how much energy and time and effort you've put into your training side of things or whatever else. So there's a lot of nerves going into that Tuesday morning. No unbelievable numbers like we saw last year with Jackson Finley running like a 4.2. I will say easily my favorite stat of the day. We've talked about this a couple of times. Quarterback Jerome Rancourt out of the University of Western Ontario, or Western University, puts up 22 reps at 225 on the bench. Just an outstanding showcase. I actually spoke to Greg Marshall while I was there. They mentioned that a little while ago they had a big time quarterback recruit come in, and he was in for a workout, and Jerome was in there, and he's like, "Are you a fullback or a linebacker or something?" He's, "No, kid, I'm a quarterback." Oh my God. So that easily was one of my favorite stats of the day.
Yeah, and again, a little setup for our discussion of the day. As you mentioned, it's in preparation for this being the potential draft class of the following year, the class of 2026, with the combines, with everything like that. But as we got into, as far as the discussion on the pregame show with the Game Day Live, you do start to see, depending on the coach, depending on the player, depending on the position, coaches who will start to maybe acquiesce isn't the right word, but who will give a player an opportunity in a certain position, knowing that it might be the best move for the team there in the moment, but it also might be an opportunity for that player to get something on film that would be more beneficial for them in the long run. And I say all that and saying that, yes, Jerome Rancourt was one of the four quarterbacks at the East-West Bowl, but this dude was also an up back on punt. Mm-hmm. Right. And, again, we talked about it, and, we'll save maybe most of the conversation for after you've gone through the week a bit more thoroughly. But, four quarterbacks from across U Sports, and three come out of Ontario, and one of them is a backup. And that's not a shot at Jerome. But again, I'm curious to, truth serum some of the U Sport coaches from Can West, AUS, RCQ, and be like, so what do you think? Let's save more of that commentary when we get into it. And I love the point you say about getting better. I think some of my personal gripes sometimes is the fact that I hurt my shoulder in my fifth year. So my benching went down from it dropped like 3-4 reps because I just wasn't benching and training for like 6 months. So, not that I was in a position to be getting tested for this level of affair, but sometimes I wonder how much of the story you get. And then if it's a kid being like, well, I got hurt. And then it's like, well, I don't want to hear excuses. It's like, well, that's the reason that I got weaker. Anyways, Tom, we have that. Now, maybe I'm mixing up the dates. So if I'm throwing you off on your mojo, forgive me. But we also have in the midst of this, correct me if I'm wrong, the global draft or is it the free agent draft? Which one is it?
Yes, the free agent draft happens on the Tuesday night that's there. As far as I could tell, no real standouts from that one. I think this is kind of in the nicest way possible, the last hurrah, the last chance that a lot of these guys have to impress in front of CFL scouts. But it is, to Waterloo's credit, this is a full similar setup to a CFL combine where it has the combine itself, and then you do the one-on-ones and everything else that you would in that setting. Just, I don't know how well that went. Let's just say that and leave that from there. Anyways,
take it off.
Moving on from the Tuesday, on the Wednesday is probably the most historic or most look forward to session outside of the game itself, which is the combined practice. And that's where you'll get a chance to see one-on-ones against Team East and Team West, inside runs, skelly periods, and then ultimately 12-on-12 with some specials. So that period or that day, you saw a whole ton of people out there, including new Green Bay Packer, Taylor Elgersma, which is still such an incredible thing to be able to say. But he was out there. We got a chance to see and hang out with him. I saw Ethan Jordan that was there. A bunch of these guys who were before they went off to CFL camps, like right before. I think EJ said that on that Wednesday, the practice, the next day he was driving up to Ottawa to start. So I got a chance to see a bunch of guys before they went off to CFL camps, which was really cool. But there was really a lot of buzz around that. And for obvious reasons, anytime you get some serious compete periods out of that, it was fantastic thing to see. I've mentioned this a couple of times, but I'll say it on the podcast here as well. I think from top to bottom, the linebacking core on both squads was just unbelievable. I mean, even just on, we'll just go through the Team East, some of the Team East guys. You've got a guy like Matthew Schill out of St. Mary's. You've got Justin Pace, a number of dudes out of the Montreal region. I mean, this is Loic Gagne from Concordia, Nicholas Roy from Montreal. Doing my best with my French accents, folks. Chris Toupin, obviously, from Carleton. Our guy, Justin Pace. I mean, these guys are some of the best at that linebacker position. And you could tell, my goodness, the athleticism on display there. We broke it down on the live stream, but on that Team West run game, with some of the offensive linemen that's on there and the running back room that they had, and guys like Donovan Malloy and Isaiah Smith and a few other guys, and you're going, oh my God, and you've got a guy like Sebastian Parcellitas, one of the nation's best fullbacks blocking for you, and that was damn near a stalemate a lot of that team run period. There was a couple that obviously went in either direction here, but my goodness, that was just a fantastic session to be able to watch on that Wednesday practice.
And then that takes us pretty well into the coaches' clinics as the summation of the week leading into the game itself, correct?
Correct. So the Thursday is just another day for meetings and film and that. And then the Friday in that afternoon, that's dedicated to the coaches' clinic. You start off with on-field work and getting a chance to hear from some really outstanding folks. I mean, one of my favorites that I saw was new defensive coordinator for the University of Alberta Golden Bears in Jean-Gab Poulin. He brought everybody through some linebacker drills and why you do it and breaking down, what you want to focus on, why you want to teach this. And he spoke really confidently and just with a lot of emphasis and was honestly really impressive. Not to say that I wasn't expecting a lot from him because he's a Vanier Cup champion linebacker with the Western Mustangs. Pretty sure he was a 1 or 2-time All-Canadian in there as well. I'd have to double check it off the top of my head. But he's outstanding at what he does. But to be able to talk and communicate that, you and I know it's not the same thing. Not the best players make the best coaches or vice versa. So the fact that he had the ability to do both was a great thing as well. I really love I tried my best to branch out, not just do O-line stuff and try to learn a little bit more. Defensive line coach out of the University of Manitoba, Andy Williams, had a great session as well, talking about long arm techniques and how do you get separation from an offensive lineman and the drills to focus on and what really to look at with your footwork in that. And one of my favorite aspects is that he actually brought out a lot of the coaches. He's like, be a part of this drill. Have the defensive lineman lean on you and watch them do a move off of you as they're trying to explode out of their stance so you could physically see it and properly teach it that way. So that's how the day starts itself. You have a few from Team East and a few from Team West, and the players are out there as well to showcase the drills themselves. And then after that, you go into a coaches panel, and it's literally the 4 conference championship coaches from across the country. So Sheriff Nicole, the head coach for the Bishop Gators, Mark McConkey, head coach for the Regina Rams, Michael Faulds for Laurier, and Glenn Constantine from Laval. And it's a coaches panel where anybody can raise their hand and ask questions and talk about, what do you think of makes a great head coach or your season or whatever the case may be, which is just an incredible experience to be a part of, especially with the conference championship coaches that are there. And then immediately from there in that same room, there were a number of different areas or different sessions that were going on. But the few that I went to, I got to hear the power run game from Coach Greg Marshall walking through, this is how we do, this is what we do things. And he even said, he goes, in the grand scheme of football, I probably know just about this much, just a tiny little bit. But what I do know, I know the hell out of. And we run power and we run our run game better than anybody. He showed this stat, and it was one of the craziest things that I'd seen. I haven't even told you this yet, but I wanted to showcase it here. In the past 10 years, the Western run game has averaged 7.8 yards per carry. In 10 years. Wow. That's an unbelievable number. They average 285 rushing yards per game, 588 total yards of offense with 49 points. Those are averages over 10 years, folks. There's teams that haven't done that in one game, let alone 10 years. So getting a chance to hear him and to listen to him, why he does what he does, how they break down, and even some of the variations, just sticking with a standard power play where you've got a guard and a fullback who are pulling over, and you go, one of the big ways that teams were blocking this was they would have somebody chase our fullback so that as a Sam linebacker comes across and he's in the hole waiting for them. Okay, so how do you get around that? You have a receiver comes in and blocks, or sometimes you just leave the fullback out there, you do counter tray instead. And he broke down all of these different scenarios in terms of how they've got around other things, and people are asking questions. And the big thing, you think about this, and especially guys like you and I who are football fans first and foremost, and especially in this setting now, you're going, this is Greg Marshall. This is one of the greatest U Sports coaches of all time. And he's up there talking with an excitement in his eyes. Like he's so excited to give back into the community. And you look in there and it's guys like defensive coordinator for Laurier, Ron Van Werkerk is in there. At one point he puts his hand up. He's like, well, I finally know what the friggin' play call is that's been killing me for the past 10 years that I've been at Laurier. And so many other U Sports coaches who are there who are wanting to pick his brain and wanting to learn from him and get better from that standpoint, along with obviously a number of other high school and summer coaches. But you have that. Immediately following him, you've got a defensive line pass rush session led by Coach Glenn Constantine, not only with a presentation on, rules and steps and whatever else, but you actually have legit game and practice film from Laval. I mentioned to Zach earlier during the week, because I played against Laval a couple of times in my McMaster career, it was like I was watching a woman undressing. I was like, I shouldn't be seeing this. This feels wrong to see. I shouldn't be seeing Laval practicing like this. This is weird. But once again, he just spoke about it like wanting to give back, wanting to be a part of this, and being involved in this amazing football community for so long and trying to give back as best he can, because he experienced that with a number of coaches. He mentioned Larry Haler, legendary coach from Western, even Greg Marshall and a number of other guys as well. And then after all of that, we go back into the Chalk Talk sessions, and you're in there with a former CFL player, current head coach for the Saskatchewan Huskies, and Scott Flory. And we're on the whiteboard drawing up plays and protections. And, this is what it's like in the Can West. We used to see a lot of match coverage, and now it's going into different things. And now I'm getting a chance to sit in, and I asked a couple of questions myself, but I'm sitting in a room and I'm watching Michael Faulds and Scott Flory talk about offense. I'm like, this is the coolest thing ever. So I really cannot get over how much I loved that coach's clinic. And I know I've been rambling for a while, but there was a lot of stuff in there.
Well, and so much great stuff. And thank you for sharing. And, it's funny thinking about the Greg Marshalls of the world and the Glenn Constantines of just the transparency and sharing not only, we all know what makes them great, and kind of showing a little bit of like, well, here's how we cook it up. And, here's what we even call it. And like, let's be real, there's a touch of hubris in all that, of being able to say like, We always said this about Western to begin with, where it's like we'll give you the plays, you know the plays, but you can't stop us. So what does it matter? Here's how we run it. It's the great magician who's gonna show you. Okay, hey, this time I'm gonna show you how I do it. Here, like we're gonna use the clear glasses this time, so you should see the ball in it. But I'm still gonna fool you because I'm just better. So I love the aspect of them giving back, and I don't think it's entirely hubris. I think they're. I mean, speaking for Greg Marshall, knowing him better, knowing of him better, he is a teacher as well in that aspect of passing it along to the next generation. So I love all those stories. I loved hearing the stories as we got to talk to some coaches on the Saturday about. You were highlighting Coach Constantine showing practice film, but of course, coaches got to use cut-ups of their plays working. And so it was funny hearing some of the stories. And I don't know, we don't need to say who was talking about all these things, or I don't know, maybe it doesn't matter one way or the other of being like, oh yeah, you sure showed that clip a lot, or you sure showed a lot of cut-ups from that game, didn't you? But ultimately, it just that brotherhood is really strong there.
Oh, 100%. And it was hilarious because when you've got Greg Marshall and Glenn Constantine, there's a lot of teams that they've beaten over their years. And so there's a lot of film from a lot of that. So in Coach Marshall's, he had a lot from his time, surprisingly, at Saskatchewan. Going up against Saskatchewan in the playoff games in 2018, I believe, and then 2021 or 22 in that Vanier Cup. And showcasing, this is why they do what they do, and this is how they do it, and whatever else. But then you can hear Mason Nias in the background because he's the offensive coordinator for this game, going, and watching this.
And was, of course, the quarterback in those games for anyone who forgot for Saskatchewan.
Yeah, 100%. And so he's having to hear that. And he did. And then obviously Laval comes in, and there's a number of either highlights from their semifinal game against Regina or the Vanier Cup against Laurier. And you go, well, at least all of this stuff is what he's actively teaching. It's not like he's just giving you some nugget that he's moved on from, because it's all stuff that you're seeing. And then you can even start to see it a little bit as well, because once again, you and I watched all of those games, but we don't have the end zone, the end cuts. And that's really where all of that fantastic O&D line play happens. At one point in time, I didn't realize, going up against Saskatchewan in particular, Laval flipped their defensive linemen. So their D tackles were out at D ends, and their D ends were in at D tackles as a 1 and a 3 tech. And I'm going, what the hell are you doing? And then it's a speed rush against a guard as a defensive end, and they're blowing by them. True. You're thinking, oh, well, why don't you just get outside? Why don't you just do like a rollout or do like a run play? And their D tackles are still fast enough that they can, at bare minimum, just create an edge. And you're going, this is just not fair. You're putting a 330-pound dude out at D end, and he's still able to keep contained.
And if we're being fair, right, and you got to establish the program to be able to attract the bells of the ball, if you will. You don't just it's you build it and then they'll come. So I don't mean to take away from this, but even your conversation you had with Coach Constantine when he's referring to getting players of the ilk of, say, Matthew Betts, he's willing to admit, a player like that, you stay out of his way and just, he's so special. You let him do his thing. And no doubt Coach Marshall has plenty of stories of that same ilk. You mentioned, just bear with me, this is my segue to get us into the game. You mentioned the name of Sebastian Parcelidis, fullback from Laurier there. It's worth noting that on the other side of it, you have Sandro Perini coming out of Western, because as we talked about, that power G, as you set it up, the importance of the fullback is so paramount, and Perini may join an incredible legacy of fullback H-backs coming out of that program to make their way to the CFL. We talk about the O-linemen that come out of that program, obviously. We talk about the running backs, obviously, but that H-back is really what opens up that offense to be able to do those things. And as we mentioned, Perini was in this game as well. So unless there's anything else we're missing there, give me a nod or a shake one way or the other, Tom.
There is one last thing that I wanted to say, and I love that you brought up the fullback as well, because it was just a hilarious note. In this Western run game, as Coach Marshall is talking, he goes, yeah, there's a lot of things you can do with the fullback, although I didn't really realize what I was doing to my fullbacks until I had my youngest son Tommy do it, and I went, "Oh my God, I don't want you to be head on head with a 300-pound D lineman. Yeah, let's get out of there." So for any of my former fullbacks before like 2014, I'm sorry for everything that I asked you to do. I
Well,
thought that was hilarious.
and I know in the London system of running power, they do a variation too, where it's essentially a guard. It's a guard trap with a fullback lead. Just switch the responsibilities there, so you get your big on big. You get a more athletic body on a more athletic body. But we'll save the chalk talk for another day for some future content. Let's get into the event, the pièce de résistance from Warrior Field in Waterloo. Final score from the 2025 East-West Bowl. Team West 32, Team East 20. Tom, we were diving through the annals of the East-West Bowl history. You mentioned only about 22 years old, I believe you had said there. And, not the highest scoring game, but certainly playing off of last year, a 16-1 victory for Team West. Really exciting football, really physical football, which shouldn't be a surprise from the standpoint, as we said, this is the audition before the big audition in talking about potentially playing in the CFL, but it is an all-star showcase. It is guys playing in systems that, as we've talked about, there are tweaks and there are changes that get made to offensive, defensive, special team systems, but core concepts are generally pretty similar. We use different language, might use a different technique, or use that technique in there. I thought about that, I don't do it, what have you. But you're still familiarizing yourself with new language, new people playing next to you. So it stands to reason if we get an outcome like the year prior, though not the most entertaining, just from the standpoint of you throw all these guys in the mix for a week and you see what you get out of it. Though the numbers don't always jump off the page when we go through it, and we'll go through the box scores because we're just going to treat this like we do any of our other game reviews from the in-season podcasts. This was a really entertaining and exciting football game.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I mean, you saw touchdown passes, you saw high scoring, there was interceptions, there was fumble returns. There was a lot to really love in this game here. Now, obviously, when you just purely look at the stats, it doesn't look all that great, especially from the offensive side. Let's remember here, folks, they only had about a week, and not even a week, less than that, to try to get an entire offense together, even if it was basic, and get on the same page with their receivers and everybody else. So the numbers themselves don't look exactly all that impressive here. But what I will say is that the game itself was way better and was really enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, from the quarterback standpoint, we've already highlighted some of these names, but for Team East, you had Alex Vreeken and Jerome Rancourt. Vreeken, of course, out of Queens, and Rancourt, as we mentioned, out of Western. On the Team West side of things, Anton Ammonrood out of Saskatchewan. And Nick Orr, the hometown kid, at least in terms of where he plays, don't know where he's from originally, hailing from Waterloo as well. Tom, you mentioned already a very strong linebacker class in this East-West Bowl. And sometimes by just comparing to years prior, you can't help but feel like there was a fall off. And, once again, when we talk about the class of guys that were there last year, highlighted by folks like Taylor Elgersma, Jackson Tuchinski, Keegan Hall, I'm probably forgetting some.
Arnaud
Desjardins,
Yeah.
Jeepers Creepers. This class of quarterbacks doesn't jump off the page for you. There's also that piece too on, like I said, probably a lot of coaches outside of Ontario, even probably in Ontario, being like, really, we picked a backup quarterback? Because again, not as a shot to him. That is what, our guy in Jerome Rancourt is. And then a guy in Vreeken who goes 4 for 13, 68 yards, no touchdowns, and 1 interception. He's been coming off a bit of an injury-plagued career. You had mentioned he looked terrific, though, in the practices you saw leading up to it. It's hard to not start with the quarterback play. Just, again, what were some of your thoughts on those talking points?
No, I think that there was a lot of really great things to watch and to see here. Throughout the week, I was really impressed by Alex Vreeken, especially in the Skelly periods and in the team periods in that Wednesday combined practice. I thought he looked really impressive. You forget as well, I guess I missed it a little bit from the stream. He's like 6'4", 6'5", like an imposing, a really good sized quarterback, see over those taller offensive linemen. And he's got a great arm. I thought he had some great decision making skills for the most part from what I saw. I really liked what I saw from him. I mean, to me, the two guys to really look for here was Alex Vreekin and was Anton Ammonrood. I mean, the two of them were gunslingers first and foremost, and Anton has showed, especially out in that Can West and University of Saskatchewan, that he will throw that ball. And even to really emphasize how much and what kind of a system that he's in, to start off that chalk talk period that I spoke about in the coaches clinic with Scott Flory comes out there, he starts it off by saying, you know, we're the reverse Western. I do a five receiver offense, and I will not even recruit a running back unless I know he can catch. We are a passing offense first and foremost, spread, whatever you want to call it, but that's what they commit to, and that's how they do things. And it was just incredible to really hear that, especially from a former offensive lineman. You don't necessarily hear that as often, or at least I feel like I don't from that standpoint. But to hear that and see that, you see why Anton and why Mason Nias obviously was so incredible, also with the ability that they have in being great quarterbacks, but in that system that allows them to really go after things and to have that. And, you know, talking even with Mason Nias during the week, you're talking to him about the growth and development of what Anton Ammonrood has and how he can really come up. And he's saying, you know, at certain points, you have to almost simplify things as best you can to really focus in on, you know, yes, there's five wide receivers plus a running back leaking out. There's six different opportunities that you have here, but let's remember these are the tendencies that we saw on in film for this defense here. This is the matchups that we really like. Let's focus in on this two-man game or on this one-on-one or on this even this three-man game. Let's just divide the field or focus on that, make it a lot more simple and go from there, because with that style of offense, yes, you get a lot of opportunities to throw touchdowns. You do also get a lot of opportunities to throw interceptions as well. And even in this game, Anton finishes 19 for 29, 301 yards, which is incredible, but one touchdown and one pick. So very, very, like, that is a perfect snapshot of what his season so far has been at the University of Saskatchewan. So much potential, so much incredible opportunity for him to grow and to really be successful here, but just need to focus it down a little bit more and try not to throw as many interceptions. So I know I just talked about the quarterbacks there, but I mean, the two of them were really, really impressive.
No, they really were. You know, and Nick Orr even.
Yes, like, absolutely.
Really nice day for himself. 5 for 8, 98 yards total, long of 55. Love it, Nick Orr. And of course, hooking up with the offensive MVP of the game in Shamar McBean for that 55-yard reception. Shamar hailing from the University of British Columbia, who finished with 142 in the air, the long of 55, and the touchdown. We saw Melkus Alonga have a nice day, both predominantly from a little trickery they had of a wildcat pass out to Ammonrood in the slot, who then hit Alonga down the sideline. And, you know, seeing names like that incredible running backfield duo of Donovan Malloy and Isaiah Smith, goodness gracious, from my Guelph Griffins, your Guelph Griffins, everybody's Guelph Griffins. Adding in Melkus into the mix there. And just, it seemed like a better ability of just getting the ball out around. Again, maybe that just reflects the nature of, as you talked about, with the Mason Nias' offense out in Saskatchewan and what they're, you know, kind of more used to out in Can West with that more spread out look. And I want to maybe take this opportunity because to that, then look at, we mentioned with the Red Black of all the things that we really like about what they're doing there. And the history of this game, the East West Bowl, doesn't show, and even in recent history, it doesn't just show a Western dominance. But when I did first look at these rosters, I did think to myself, Team West does seem to be a good cut above Team East. Mm-hmm. Is that reflective of the fact that in contemporary years, the AUS has been a weaker conference, perhaps? Maybe so. But again, you go back to 2023, as you were highlighting, we were talking before, and you have a Team East blowout. So maybe it's not reflective in there. I do think it would be an additional little fun piece of content they could throw in there. I know there's always concerns about, but what about the people who get drafted last and all these types of things? Like, folks, look, a year from now, a lot of these kids aren't getting drafted at all. Like, that's the truth of the matter. A lot of guys from East West last year got drafted this year. Most of them didn't. So,
Mhm.
like, I don't know who we're trying to, again, maybe people just don't think that's an engaging idea. Maybe the idea of the East West, obviously, it means East West, so we keep it that way. But already, we're kind of splitting Ontario in sometimes random ways, anyhow. Like, it doesn't really make sense, the East West divide, when you have Ontario West, Ontario East, and then parts of Ontario. I think that'd be a fun aspect to it. But that isn't to say that Team East, I want a little French there, the Equipe Est, we're a bunch of schlubs. By no means at all. I do want to throw that out into the ether. Perhaps it's been discussed. I don't know. I think it would make for, clearly we're doing it with red black. I think that would be a cool addition to it.
Yeah, I love that idea as well. You really just, you know, here's an opportunity to see something like, even going back in the day, you've got somebody like a Garrett Rooker throwing to like a Ben Harrington out of St. FX or something along those lines, which I think would just be such a cool concept. I mean, even here, you've got Nick Orr throwing to Shamar McBean, which is just really outstanding as well. But to literally be able to say you've got a coast to coast connection in something like that, I think would be really awesome. So I think your idea has some merit there, my friend.
And now we'll talk about the defense in more detail. You already highlighted some of those incredible linebackers on Team East, but I want to start off with a guy that you brought to my attention, and we've obviously seen him in some of the high leverage games. He's a Vanier Cup champion in Angel Vital out of the University of Laval. And he ends this game 8 for 36 from for Team East, I should say. Again, the numbers don't jump off the page, but watching him, and then again, we got to talk with Coach Constantine both on the interview you did with him, but then we kind of just shot the breeze for another like 15 minutes because like you're gonna do that when you get that opportunity. And he talks about the vision, the ability to, he's a great zone runner, which if you're not familiar with what that means, at the core of it, it certainly speaks to patience and vision as a running back. The numbers don't jump off the page, but you got to see this young man all week in Angel Vital speak to what he showed on the day and throughout the week.
Yeah, exactly like you mentioned there. He's not somebody who's gonna like, oh, he's got like 6 inches of daylight. He's now gone and he's gonna outrun you here. But he is one of those guys where the insanity and the madness that is offensive line against defensive lineman running a zone concept where you're trying to just create gaps. He was really good, in my opinion, grabbing the ball, taking his time, being patient, or even setting up blocks, and then cutting back offside and going down into a gap. And that's what the best zone runners really do. I mean, the guy that I thought was one of the best, at least at my time at McMaster, was Chris Pizzetta, and that same kind of style where he's able to just slow things down, set things up, and go and hit. And in that same vein, he is able to take a hit and still keep going and keep churning and fight for extra yards. And so I really liked what I saw from Angel Vital from this as well. And with, the Laval Rouge or offense and how they run zone, this is their bread and butter. And this is the running back who can really thrive in that kind of a system here. So to see that as well going into here, you really got a chance to see him really flourish, especially in that inside run period on that Wednesday and then in the game itself as well. So he was really great. I mean, we saw a number of times. I don't know what happened necessarily with Quinton Scott, running back for Laurier. He's only listed as one rush for 3 yards here. But he's another guy, especially watching some of the spring camp practices, that he is that dude. Give him 6 inches of daylight and he is gone. So interesting to see that he didn't really have a chance to really showcase what he did in the game. I can't remember if he got injured or not. I don't think we saw any real main injuries in this game, thankfully. But anyways, the number of really great running backs here, obviously highlighted by one Angel Vital.
And you mentioned obviously being at the Greg Marshall led session on power running, gap scheme, the counter trade type things. In many ways, zone running as a concept is the simplest way you can run an offense, but arguably the hardest to perfect. Because when you're doing those power runs, oftentimes it is just going downhill and you either get your blocks or you don't, but you know where you're running. And it's like, you're either going to break it for yardage or you're going to run into a wall. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So being able to, as you said, with Laval, perfect that system is, again, which is such a beautiful thing to appreciate in a coach. I know you want to jump in on it, to take something that's fundamentally simple, but do it to the very best ability of anybody.
Well, it was really outstanding because, we just going off of everything that we talked about in the coaches clinics and that kind of session here, and even what you mentioned about that, there's a tiny little bit of hubris in there in terms of, this is what we're doing, this is to try to stop us. In that chalk talk session, when I'm talking to him about, okay, so like, what is your run game if you are like a 5R? And in behind me in that auditorium, Greg Marshall pipes up and says, they run inside zone better than anybody across the country, period. And I go, wow, okay, yes, Coach Flory, would love to hear that. And he doesn't say a word. He goes, yeah, we just kind of run zone and we do our thing. And I try to goad him a little bit more. Coach Michael Falls tries to goad him a little more. No, he won't say a single thing about how he coaches his offensive line, what he says to his running backs, anything. He's just, yes, we run inside zone and, we do it pretty well. That was it. That was like, you son of a, okay, I guess you do have to keep some stuff here. But man, that was one aspect where I was like, okay, this is, you are still a competitive dude at the end of the day. You're not giving away secrets.
Oh my gosh, we're gonna have to get some end zone cuts of the Huskies and grind some tape. Tom, Team East defensively, you already went through the names, really are the heroes of the show for
Yes.
Team East in keeping them in this game. We see the first half, nearly right at the end of the first half, finish off with a pick six by young man out of McGill, who I had the distinct privilege and honor of getting an interview after the show, the defensive MVP in JT Copeland Lewis, who gets a pick six pretty much to cap off the first half. And then defensive player making an impact on specials, literally the last play of the game. They didn't even kick the extra point. My guy in Chris Toupin out of Carleton they give him 2 fumble recoveries, 1 forced fumble, but the one in particular of the 2, he ends up scooping and scoring. It was a weird one where Horvat kind of bobbles it a little bit, and then Toupin just kind of said, I would like that, and took it and ran into the end zone. I don't know if that's what they're crediting him with, the forced fumble. They don't give him a block. I don't know how they scored that one. But so 14, or sorry, more specifically 13, because they didn't kick the extra point on the Toupin touchdown. 13 of the Team East 20 points coming on a pick six and a punt, forced fumble recovery, and touchdown. Major other players on the defense there. Your guy in Justin Pace picking up a lot of tackles on the day as well. What were you liking from the defensive players? Jackson Brashear, as we talked about, just again, proof that Ottawa U is just linebacker U, apparently, continuing in that tremendous lineage. What'd you like about out of Team East defensively? They give up, the 32 points, but they're making huge plays for their team on the other side of the ball.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth there. I was going to mention Ottawa U is absolutely linebacker U at this particular point in time. If Jackson Brashear is continuing that unbelievable showcase that we've seen from the University of Ottawa over the past 3 or 4 years with great linebacker play, I think he's got the capabilities to do it. 4.5 total tackles, 1 sack, and I believe that 1 tackle for loss is that sack as well, because it does list 1 and 11 for both. But anyways, yeah, he really had an outstanding showcase. I liked a lot of the defensive linemen that I saw here as well. I mean, Amari Hastings on that the defensive end side as well. I mean, or sorry, the actual defensive end, meaning the defensive secondary from that side. Seeing him be able to do his thing there. Patrick Cumberbatch, obviously, Justin Pace, like you mentioned. Like, there was a lot of really outstanding play here. And I liked a lot of the interior play, let's say. But this was just, man, if you love defense and if you love even just overall offense, this was just a great freaking game, man.
No, totally. And let's stick with the defense. And maybe it's part of a larger point, but maybe not. We've talked about this over the years, and York just came off one of the more impressive years in some time, since the Hunchak years, really, which isn't that long ago, but we're coming on a decade now, and for flip the script, look at the little Team West defense. I don't remember if Team West, if Jean Gab ever ran them out like this, but the York Lions had a full linebacking core at this game in Peyton Ryder, in Kirill Nyari, And then in why am I forgetting?
Brody Clark.
And Brody Clark. We've talked about this year in year out, looking at the combines and the players they pump into the CFL, and everyone knows it at this point. It's remarkable, and once again, recognizing that York's coming off of a very impressive year, and there's a lot to be excited for in that program. There's a lot still to be like, okay, they're making some interesting decisions and choices here, bringing in a lot of people, letting some people go. I don't know. That's one way to do it. But man, oh man, and plenty of other people to talk about on that Team West side of things, defensively or otherwise. But my goodness, to be able for one program, to be able to pump out a full positional group, that's special.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be. And especially when you look at, what was the high point of that defense last year, it was those linebackers. And I think while, yes, you have outstanding linebackers and outstanding capabilities, and they showcase exactly why they were so good in this showcase here, it's no secret that Knox loves outstanding linebackers. I mean, like I've mentioned this a couple of times in 2011, 2012, and 2014, when he was a defensive coordinator, three different linebackers won the President's Award as the top defensive player in the country here. So no surprise to me that he's recruiting some of the best linebackers to get out here. And that's a testament not only to him, but these guys who are here. And I mean, Peyton Ryder, for the most part, I was talking to a number of folks there. He is 100% being overlooked because of his height. He's not listed as very big. I don't know if they have the actual height and weights here. I wasn't able to find it myself, but because of that, there's a lot of teams that are saying, I don't think he can do it or whatever. But consistently, wherever he goes and plays linebacker, he plays pretty damn well. He's strong as an ox. He's able to bench press off offensive linemen as they're coming up to him and trying to block him. And he even finishes here as the second leading tackler for Team West at 3.5 tackles. Let's not forget here, folks, that a lot of these, I mean, they're bringing in like 5 or 6 linebackers per team. So they're swapping guys out pretty constantly here. So Peyton Ryder probably got, half a game, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less kind of thing, along with all of these guys. So to see him with that, with 3.5 tackles, potentially even leading up to, 7 or 8 or 9 tackles if he had played the whole game, that just showcases why that York defense was so damn improved this past season.
Yeah, and in some regards, like when you just again thinking about his build, when you see him, I think we've talked about Parcelidis and Perini already, and you see him in pads, you are thinking right away, you're probably like, yeah, he looks like a fullback more so. And I don't know if he has the athleticism, but we certainly heard talking with some of the scouts that were there how when it comes to Canadian running backs, blocking is an easy make or break for a young kid. So Peyton's an example where not knowing his full athleticism, where you're right, he does get overlooked, and maybe it's not fair that he gets overlooked, and it's not my position to say whether he is or isn't. That would be an interesting thing to see if in the future, if maybe he gets some looks on the offensive side, even just from that standpoint, give him something on tape to be able to show someone, all right, look, if you really don't think I have the build to cut it on the defensive side of the ball, I can block for you and protect that $500,000-$600,000 quarterback you have back there. Tom, our guy, Denny Ferdinand, we talk about Ottawa U being linebacker U. They have a strong case to make it, perhaps even a better case to make of being DBU. And he, with the transfer from Carleton 2 years ago now, is another immense part of that lineage. Ends up leading Team West in tackles with 4 solos, the interception to boot. Obviously, he got to see his brother go through this process in Kasim the year before. He's now had a year with Ottawa, coming off of that missed season, his last year at Carleton. Really nice. We saw some great things of him last year. I don't think, looking quickly through the box score, he got, no, he didn't get any returns. He's a tremendous returner as well. Really nice to see this young man come into form. And again, part of what is going to be the strength of that Ottawa team as a whole, that defensive linebacking core and secondary. Great day for Denny Ferdinand.
Yeah, an outstanding day. And you and I have been singing his praises for a little while now. I mean, just that entire Ferdinand family is just unbelievable and talented. And Denny's no slouch either. So to get a chance to see him really do his thing in an all-star showcase amongst other unbelievable players as well. I think once again just kind of cements how good of an athlete he truly is in this regard. So yeah, I love that you brought that up. He played really outstanding. The majority of that defensive secondary actually played really well. The second interception on the day for Team West going to Ben Sangwa. I believe he's a defensive back out of Calgary, if I remember correctly. We can obviously look this up pretty quickly here, but a lot of really great things to say and to see with a lot of these guys. There was one guy in particular here that I wanted to make sure that I shouted out. I don't know if he actually registered a tackle or not, but there was a defensive lineman out of the University of Manitoba who I thought had some really outstanding capabilities here in one Caleb Mackey McLeod. He's listed at 6'3", 236 pounds, out of Winnipeg. So hometown kid for Manitoba. But obviously, he gets a chance to showcase what he's been doing. It was his defensive line coach that was there as well. But his capabilities, the smooth moves that I saw him have pretty consistently here, I really enjoyed watching him do his thing. And I think he's one guy to really look out for as a top tier defensive lineman going into next season, at least from what I saw.
And just on the correction, Ben Samoa out of UBC.
Thank you, sir.
Little iron sharpening iron when you think about a guy like himself and Shamar McBean getting to duke it out, practice in, practice out. Tom, final thoughts on the game, the event. As we mentioned, we got to interview Shamar McBean, offensive MVP. You did. Jean-Gab Poulin got to interview with JT Copeland-Lewis, and of course, Coach Glenn Constantine. Any final thoughts on the event? Again, shout out to our guys in Royal Media for helping us cover the day. Yeah, last thoughts on on your week and the highlight with the East West Bowl.
Yeah. Once again, talking about one of my favorite experiences, one of my favorite events, period, is this East West Bowl, because to me, it is top to bottom just a celebration of football, first and foremost. You see the best players that U Sports has to offer across the country, and you see them in an environment that is so welcoming and so incredible. And I know we mentioned this kind of briefly here, but I really cannot overstate my own appreciation for the entire University of Waterloo staff. Chris Bertoya, Kevin McNeil, Brendan Conway, Marianne Vaughn, everybody in that organization are unbelievable people. They've hosted this for the past couple of years now. Every single person that I've spoken to has said nothing but the outstanding remarks amongst all of these guys. I mean, K-Mac is no slouch to all of these kinds of events. He's fantastic at what he does, despite what he says about not being a people person. He absolutely is. Bertoya is just such a champion for just football in general and wanting to grow the game and wanting to give back and do everything else. And there's a lot of stuff that as a head coach, you could technically say, you know what, I'm the head guy. There's a lot of other stuff that I got to do. Like, hey, can somebody else do this or whatever else? But he's the guy doing a lot of this, and he's the one who's getting out there. And Brendan Conway's doing the same thing. And so I really cannot get over my own appreciation for that entire team, that entire organization, for what they do for this sport and this program. I mean, one of my favorite post-game interviews that I got a chance to do was with Justin Pace, another one of the guys to that list as well. And I was talking to him about what was your experience like, and he said word for word, and you'll hear it in an interview when we post it a little later on, this was one of the best weeks of my life because of all of the people that he got a chance to meet. I mean, even he was like, specifically for me being a French Canadian linebacker, getting a chance to learn from another French Canadian linebacker in Jean Gab, who coached for Team East because his connections to Quebec and speaking French in general. I literally think that's what they said. Well, you can speak French. Why don't you go with Team East? And Justin Pace was saying to be able to pick his brain and to see about another French Canadian linebacker who played this game at the very highest of levels, and to see and get a few nuggets here and there of wisdom and things. To see the joy that was on Pace's face as he was going about this just cements me as this is such an incredible event. Thank you to Waterloo. Thank you to all of those who are involved in this. And I cannot wait for it next year.
And shout out to our guy and Andrew Graham as the strength coach there, facilitating the combine. And of course, at the Invitational Combine is, the reason it's so good is they're just getting the reps. They're getting so good at it, but I don't know why they'd want to go anywhere else. And it's a great event. And it would be, who would want to try to take that on from the purposes of, let alone the planning, but having to try to compare to what Bertoya and his team there at Waterloo does. Tom, fantastic job by you, not just on the pod, but for the full week and change of coverage that you've been doing wire to wire in the great city of Kitchener Waterloo. That'll do it for our coverage here today. Again, an awesome week of football, starting with the Senior Bowl, the Red Black, and capping off with the East West Bowl. That'll do it for us for probably a little bit. There's some news and notes that'll come through as CFL camps are in the process of happening, and we learn more and more about who some guys that are likely to start returning. Maybe our way too early predictions are going to be on the horizon as a result of it. We're certainly going to get our top 55 going into next year, rocking and rolling as we prepare to put that out at the end of the summer. And what more could you want from us? Well, let us know, and we'll try to bring it to you as best we can. We'll talk to you right here soon at the 55.